What's up? What's up? Another day leveled up. It's your boy Salem, back with another one for you. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 books that have changed my life. These are my 5 top books. Each of them I've read many times over, at least twice, and I continue to go back to them because they're so important. There's something I learn each time I reread these books. So the first one I want to get into is the book called The Fifth Agreement. I do not have it on hand today because I happened to lend it out and haven't got it back, but I do have it on Audible. But if anything, that confirms the greatness of the book. And it's by Don Miguel Ruiz and Don Jose Ruiz, which is a father and son duo. Don Miguel Ruiz wrote the 4th agreement, and his son decided to add a 5th agreement to the book, but they're pretty similar. I haven't read the 4th, but I've skimmed through it and it's pretty similar, and either or, they're great. And what this book really gets into is how we've been programmed to see the world since birth. And depending on where we were born, also determines how we see the world as well. And things as far as like symbols and languages, we all agree on those things. Say that's a tree. We all agree here that that's a tree and that it's called a tree. But say I was born in China or India, it'd be called something else, and we would all agree upon that. And every little thing in our life is all agreed upon since birth. And we agree upon those things without an option. We're forced into this type of mentality and perception of the world depending on where we're born and the people that we are brought up around, the schools that we're in. It all determines our perception of the world. And it also shows you that every mind is a world, and that the war on politics and trying to get someone to see the world as you see it, or however that politician sees it, is a never-ending game, because there's no way, it's impossible to ever see the world through my eyes the same way you see the world through your eyes. And there's a really cool story in how it describes, like, if I was in a movie theater watching my own movie, sitting next to myself, how different I would see the world by looking at it through even my own eyes. And then I go to another movie theater and I sit down, there's only one person in there, and my mom's in there. And I'm watching my mom get ready and how she sees the world and how she sees me, and it's completely different on how I actually see myself. And I'm just a character in her own movie, and it's crazy once you start to wrap your mind around that concept that no one will ever see the world as you do through your own eyes. And it also then tells you how to start looking at the world and get rid of the fear of people looking at you a certain way, because the perception means nothing. They're not going to ever see you the same way you see yourself, so their perception on you really doesn't even matter. And how you could live hell on earth or heaven on earth, it's all your decision. You could have a living hell or living heaven on earth, but it's all up to you. And that book is pivotal to just allowing you to be free and just not worry about too much in the opinion of others. So that's the first book, Fifth Agreement. Second book I want to get into is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I'm sure you've heard me bring this up many times in videos, but this book is powerful, and no pun intended. But this book, what it's so great at is first off, it's written in a form of Q&A, and he has a student that is asking them all these questions on life and relationships, life and death, and he answers them all through a perception of higher consciousness, like through the spirit, and it resonates with you, resonates with me at least on a whole other level that I can't really describe. But every time I reread it, I'm given that same sense of consciousness I feel, and the perception of the world, and able to look at it and things around me through the eyes of the spirit. And it's powerful to get along in relationships and just things that seem to bug you throughout your life. And just really helps you get a grasp on the relationship with yourself, the spirit, the Most High, and as well as the spirit that dwells in everyone else and every sentient being on this planet. And there's a quote in there that really stood out to me, and I always think about it now. And he's asked, like, what is God and what is love? And he says, God is the power and the force behind all living things, all sentient beings. And love is the recognition, the awareness of God behind all living things, and recognizing that and honoring that and seeing that, like looking at your dog, looking at your significant other, looking at your family, and knowing that they're all focal points of God looking back at you, pretty much gives you the chills, gives me chills. And it's a great book. And every time I read it, I'm left with a sense of ease and lightness and just a great lens on life. So, great book. Whoa. Whoa. We got a little hiccup there, but it's all good. We can continue. So, third book is called The Way of the Superior Man. I don't have this book on hand either, but I was shown this book by my past roommate, one of my best friends, and he was reading it. It was in his book stack, and I just started to read a bit of it, and I was compelled to get it myself, but I got on Audible because I knew I was going to want to reread this book many times over. And it's a book about just the spiritual side of mastering women, work, and your sexual desires. And the way it breaks things down is just so awesome. And it's like, it breaks down your purpose and why it's important to have a purpose when you're dealing with women, and allows you not to get too swept up in their emotions and act irrational. Knowing that chasing women is all around a mirage. If you are always looking for a sense of happiness by getting that woman and finally getting her, it's gonna be ephemeral and slowly fade away. It's all smoke. And it really lets you know how to deal with female nature. This book is like trumps any dating book, anything you need to know on how to attract and maintain a relationship, even through marriage. I feel this book has all those answers. And me dating right now helps me every time I come across something that's I can't really put my finger on and I need help with while dealing with the woman in my life. I go back to this book and I'm able to solve it. But it also allows you to tailor your own relationship. Realize that every man is different. Talks about women having different temperature, and men need different things, a cooling or hot type of woman to get them at ease or give them more energy to get on their purpose and things like that. The polarities in masculine and feminine. And it also gets into semen retention and why ejaculation should be consciously chosen, and when it is chosen, to learn how to ejaculate up the spine, which is crazy. but I'll let you guys get into that yourself. Fourth book is the book, the Kybalion. This book here is a magical book. It pretty much has gold pages. It just looks magical, but the way I got this book was even more magical, and how I came across it was I was working at this hotel. I'm gonna keep this story real short. I was working at this hotel, and there was this holistic doctor that was staying there during that time, and he was handing out all this money to all my staff and employees, and I came across the time I was a courtesy driver, and I was going to take him to this jazz club, but on the way we started talking about metaphysical things and laws of vibration, and he tells me to stop the car, and he's like, yo, you know about those things? And I'm like, just know a little bit, you know. And he has me hold out my hand, and he would always carry around this like linen satchel. This dude dressed real down, just jeans and a blazer and a satchel. But he puts in my hand like stacks of hundreds and gold bars in my hands. The story sounds crazy now that I'm even retelling it, but I'm blown away, and he tells me to put it all back in the bag, and he's like, I'm not even going to give you any of this, because if you can understand this, I'm just going to give you 2 books I'm going to recommend you, and if you can understand them, you'll have everything I have and more. And the first book was The Fifth Agreement. The second was this book, The Cabal Yin here. And I was so pumped to go get this book. Ran to the bookstore, they didn't have it. It was out of stock for like months. So it made it even more special once I finally got it in my hands. But this book basically is talking about the Hermetic philosophy, the 7 Hermetic principles by the 3 initiates, and basically breaking down the rules of life. We're placed on this earth with no direction, no set of rules, not knowing how things work. So this book breaks down the principles that life works on, which is 1, vibration, mentalism, correspondence, polarity, rhythm, and gender, and cause effect. It's 7, cause and effect. But each of those have their significance in the book. It's a small book. It's about 150 pages, but it's so dense that you can only read 1 chapter and sit on it and meditate on it, because it's so deep in the way they describe things, and the way of vibration and the polarity. Everything has its opposites, as above, so below. The rhythm and things, and cause and effect, and the realization that everything happens for a reason. There's always a reason, even to the point of rolling a dice. It breaks down how the force behind your swing of the dice, and the actual carpet or the material that it's rolling on all has an effect on how it then lies, how the dice lie. And say a boulder were to fall on a house, you'd be like, oh shit, that's just that's unfortunate, but it explains there was always a process behind it all, with the rain and the way the land was shifting, and it gave way for that boulder to fall on that house. But there's always a cause and effect, and this gets you thinking. But every time I read this book, it gives me more insight into, gives me new insights on life and where I'm at. Probably read this about 3 times or so, but I mark all throughout this book, and I pretty much highlight like every other page, make notes. I have these notes in the front of the book I write, and keeps me in a good headspace. But I'm almost to a point where I'm marking every other page, but the book will probably be filled with markings here soon. But the 4th book, I'm on the 5th book. This is the 5th book. Last but not least, the book, The Alchemist. This book right here, I wouldn't be here without this book. This book set me on a journey of leaving my hometown, looking at the world in a mystical type way, and it's knowing that the universe is always conspiring in my favor. I'd say quote in that book that I will never forget. This book is a book of fiction, but it's very necessary. I think it's necessary for us to have a narrative in our head that we live our life in, because it helps make this life even more enjoyable. And it's a fable about following your dream. And throughout it talks about this boy who's a shepherd who has this vision of finding gold at the pyramids and his trials and tribulations, omens he's coming across, the woman in his life that comes in the midst of his journey, him having to decide to leave her and really go on his purpose. And it's just a magical book that I like to reread just to, when I'm getting too wrapped up in the everyday type things and the realities of life, this gets you back in the mode to realize like life is pretty magical. And all these books, I feel, go hand in hand together. I'll reread them again, list them off. There's the Alchemist, The Fifth Agreement, Power of Now, Kybalion, and The Way of the Superior Man. All these books, I feel, when you read them simultaneously, you're able to understand each other book differently and look at it with different eyes and a different lens, and you're able to absorb things differently. I read them in that order of The Alchemist, Fifth Agreement, Power of Now, Kybalion, and The Way of the Superior Man. That's just how the chips fell for me, but do whatever you feel compelled to do, because I know it's not a one-size-fits-all, but these books have changed my life. I wanted to share them with you guys because it's important to know where I get my information. I want you guys to know and be able to see the world how I see it as well. These are 5 of many books I've read, but I will always keep dear to me and close to me. So with that said, if any of these resonated with you and you felt like compelled to want to purchase them yourself, I'll place the links of all of them in my description. And I appreciate you guys and just want to share some wisdom, But if any of this resonated with you guys, this whole talk, you could like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified when I drop more content. Until next time, it's your boy Salem. I'm out.